All right, we just pressed the Let's Go Live button. We're waiting for the stream to fire up on all cylinders. Looks like Facebook is online, Periscope is online, and now we are finally live on YouTube as well. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here at the R&R Law Group. Right there, you can see our sign in Scottsdale, Arizona. My team and I, over the years, we've helped thousands of people facing criminal charges. And so we started this show called Watching the Watchers. The reason we did it is to hold law enforcement, prosecutors, police officers, politicians, judges, anybody who's involved in the criminal justice system. We want to hold them accountable. Over the years, we've seen a lot of misconduct, a lot of malfeasance, really gross things happening in our justice system and our society in general. And so we believe that the best way to sort of help get this stuff out in front, out in the public eye, is by talking about it, by shining some sunlight down on it. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And of course, in today's day and age, in 2020, criminal justice is the topic du jour. Everybody is talking about it. And today, the big story is, of course, Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor, we covered this story when it happened originally, way back. I think it was in March, and we've been following it along for months and months and months. And today, there was a culmination. So the grand jury came out, they read their indictment against one of the officers. We're going to dive into that story. Then we've got some other updates on some of the other stories we've been following on this channel. We've got some more information about Jacob Blake. We've got Kyle Rittenhouse update. His defense team and his organization, the FightBack organization, released a new video. I watched it. I've got some thoughts on it. And then we've got another case with a new individual. And we've got, of course, some Supreme Court gossip that's been going around. So we're going to give all of that to you today. We've got a packed show, so let's just jump right into it. Before we get started, if you're not a regular on this channel, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. It's great to see other people joining the channel. Really gives us some good motivation and helps keep us wanting to create all of this content. It's a lot of fun. I love when people are here and they're joining us. So let's get into it. Breonna Taylor. Well, like I said, we covered this. We've been speaking about this case for a long time. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the settlement that the family received. And now today, it looks like Louisville, Kentucky is on the verge of riots, literally as we are speaking. The indictment came out today, this afternoon. I believe it was at 1:30 time in Kentucky. And since then, we've seen a lot of turmoil. We're seeing that Louisville is basically bracing for riots. They've been boarding up a lot of the courts and a lot of their businesses. And so it is just about sundown in Kentucky right now. So literally, as we're covering this story, the sun is going down. And by the end of this show, we're going to see more about what is happening. There's a curfew order in effect. There's an emergency has been declared, but we're going to see if any of that does anything to stem the tide of the rioters and the burning and the looting and everything that we've been seeing for far too long. So we were talking about Breonna Taylor. Quick recap. These are the three officers who were involved. So we had Brett Hankison. This officer was actually charged today, but the other two were not. We've got Jonathan Mattingly and we have Miles Cosgrove. You can see all three of these gentlemen here. A quick refresher on what happened in Breonna Taylor's case. So there was some issue about whether there was a no-knock warrant or a knock warrant. We're going to talk about that. But they were executing a warrant on Breonna Taylor's house. She was living with her boyfriend at the time, Kenneth Walker, who allegedly was under investigation for some sort of drug crimes. When they went to the residence to actually enter into Breonna Taylor's apartment, they had to break in. They claimed that they made a knock. Nobody came to the door, so they broke in. The two people who were first through the door, Jonathan Mattingly, so this guy right here in the middle, was the first officer who was actually through the door. And he enters into the apartment. He's looking down the hallway, and he sees Kenneth Walker, and he also sees Breonna Taylor down the hallway. They are, according to him, according to this officer, they have a gun. They have their arms raised, and they are pointing it his direction. He ends up getting shot in the leg, and so he fires back. At that same time, Miles Cosgrove is also sort of in the doorway, just about to come in. He's firing his rounds down the hallway also. And then Brett Hankison is a detective, and he is still outside of the apartment building, but he also unloads. He fires 10 shots inside at the building. Now, Kenneth Walker never got, he wasn't killed. He was just investigated. He was arrested. He fired back. But Breonna Taylor was shot. There was some allegations that it was 5 times. They said today in the press conference that it was 6 times. And the public has been following this very, very closely. And it's actually gotten a lot more steam since George Floyd, since Jacob Blake, since Daniel Prude. People started to get more and more interest about Breonna Taylor, and for good reason. You know, she was a beautiful young girl. She just got her EMT. I mean, you see her with the pictures with flowers and everything like that, just ecstatic that she's making some accomplishments in life. And suddenly she is no longer with us. She's dead. We have these 3 cops who are not being charged with anything up until today. And so a few days ago, the Louisville Police Department canceled all off days and all vacations as the agency prepared for the Attorney General Daniel Cameron announcement regarding Breonna Taylor. So they are going into high alert. This is the memorandum that you'll see from the actual Chief of Police, Robert Schroeder. He says that in anticipation of this announcement, declaring a state of emergency for Louisville Metro Police Department to ensure that we have all the things that we need. Police functions, everybody being around, so emergency response plan, and so on. He goes on to say that this declaration includes all of these different things. It includes all of these other emergency provisions, and so on and so forth, basically indicating that this is a big deal. You know, this is going to be something that they are bracing hard for. The LMPD on Twitter said that they are basically warning anybody with businesses in Louisville that we're gonna have to hunker down here. They're gonna place vehicle barricades around Jefferson Square Park. They're gonna restrict access. They're gonna restrict traffic in these certain locations. They're gonna be limiting parking garages and so on. Sorry for the inconvenience. We know it's gonna cause difficulty, but we're trying to be proactive. And you know, many people were thinking maybe this is overkill. We don't even know what the grand jury is going to do yet. This prosecutor still hasn't even announced anything. Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General, hasn't even told us what the charges are, but everybody kind of knew that regardless of what comes out of this case, unless all 3 guys are charged for murder, which was obviously not going to happen, that people are going to be upset about it. So I think that regardless of what happened today, they were probably going to protest one way or the other. It was not going to be good enough unless it was 100% they're all 3 being tried for murder, which wouldn't have been the appropriate charges. And the city was responding accordingly. So we see here, this is Gene Snyder U.S. Courthouse. They are barricading all of the windows there. And we've got some other, photograph. This is very, very a wild scene. This is not something that you see regularly. We've got this Shell station that's also been boarded up. You look around here, you can see all of these, convenience store windows are being boarded up. Everything's on lockdown. Over here, you can't even pump gas for the next few days as the city goes down on lockdown mode again. All of these businesses being boarded up. The streets are empty. Walgreens is also just basically, locked up, inaccessible. Police are setting up barricades, workers are out. Everybody is bracing. All of the streets are being locked down. And, this is high alert. This is literally what we're dealing with in our criminal justice system right now. People are very upset about it. The stakes are high, tensions are high, and we want to look in and say, what are these officers doing? What are these cops doing? So we had talked about Jonathan Mattingly. Rightfully, the protesters are upset. The rioters are upset. Doesn't justify any of their behavior or what they're doing to burn down innocent businesses and innocent court buildings and all of these other things. I understand they're upset, but that's not justified. But the tensions are also high with the police. So Jonathan Mattingly, who was the first officer who was through the door, through Breonna Taylor's apartment, he goes in there, he gets shot, and then he writes this bizarre email over this. It just came out on September 22nd, so this was yesterday. So Jonathan Mattingly is a sergeant for the LMPD, and he writes this bizarre email that I want to read with you just to show sort of what the police are thinking and how they're communicating, because this is always interesting to me. The law enforcement, sometimes the way that I see them approach their job and their lives and how they're operating seems to me like they think they're in the middle of a war zone and they're fighting a holy war, or they're doing something that is almost at a different level or more important than the rest of the things that we're doing. You know, they're heroes in their minds. They're heroes to a lot of people. They do a lot of heroic things, but just the fact that you're an officer, in my opinion, doesn't make you a hero any more than being a lawyer just happens to make you a hero, or a firefighter happens to make you a hero. Just because you have a profession, that does not make you a hero. Doing heroic things makes you a hero. And when I read this email, it's a bizarre email, but let's go through it. And this is what he sends, it looks like, to the entire Louisville Metro Police Department. This is his email. You can see here that he sends this on 9/22 at 2:09 in the morning. So early in the morning yesterday. This email goes out to everybody, all Louisville Metro PD, all sworn officers. He says, "Hey family, I'm not here to give you a rah-rah. You got this speech. I'm not here to tell you that you signed up to help this community and to keep your head up. I'm here to tell you I'm sorry you have to go through this. I'm sorry your families have to go through this. I'm sorry the mayor, Amy Hess, Chief Conrad, failed us all in epic proportions for their own gain and to cover their asses." So, you know, right out of the gate, he's just flipping everything on everybody else. Everybody else is the problem. We didn't do anything wrong in this particular case. He says to all of the officers, presumably this is going to literally every single LMPD officer. He says, "You do not deserve to be in this position, the position that allow thugs to get in your face and yell, curse, and degrade you, throw bricks, bottles, urine, and expect you to do nothing. It goes against everything we were taught in the academy." I don't know what that means, but I'm going to guess that in the academy, I've never been through the academy, but I'm going to guess that they talk to you about de-escalation and about restraint, you know, about restraining yourself and not just going in and fighting back. If somebody curses at you and degrades you, you have to be the bigger person. That's why you're an officer. You're higher trained. You're trained not to get involved and let your emotions take advantage of you. But that's not what this guy says. And his rant just continues to go on. He says, "The position that if you make a mistake during one of the most stressful times in your career, the department and the FBI," who he's about to blast right here, he says, "the department and the FBI, who aren't cops and would piss their pants if they had to hold the line, go after you for civil rights violations. Your civil rights mean nothing, but the criminal has total autonomy." So he is literally, the FBI, we're going to learn, is still involved in this case. They're conducting a big part of the investigation. The investigation was sort of bifurcated. So it sounds like the Attorney General for Kentucky took over a lot of the shooting investigation and really what happened once the officers were inside Breonna Taylor's house, but they're missing part of what led up to that. So in other words, they're missing the warrant portion of the case. What happened with the warrant? Who signed it? Why were they at this residence to begin with? There's some indication that they were at the wrong residence. They had the wrong guy. And anyways, that was all being handled by the FBI. Why was the warrant executed? That's not part of the Attorney General's purview here. And so this guy's blasting the FBI, he's blasting the department, and he's saying that they're going after them for civil rights violations. Okay. So he says the criminal has total autonomy, but your civil rights as an officer means nothing. He goes on. He says, "We all signed up to be police officers. We knew the risks and we were willing to take them, but we always assumed the city had your back. We wanted to do the right thing in the midst of an evil world to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Is he talking about Breonna Taylor? I don't know, because she has no criminal record as far as I know. She was just standing there. No indication she was holding a weapon, but she is now dead. She was not able to protect herself, but the cops killed her. These 3 cops killed her. He says, "We wanted to do the right thing in the midst of an evil world to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to enforce laws that make it possible to live in a peaceful society. We as a police do not care if you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever you identify with as this week," which is kind of a needle in people. That's commentary. He's saying that people are changing identities and identifying as, multiple genders or whatever it is. He's kind of poking fun. He says, "We aren't better than anyone. This is not an us against society, but it is good versus evil." And that type of language, I think, is very, very concerning, right? Law enforcement are there to deal with people, not evil people. Every single person that this cop pulled over for a traffic ticket wasn't evil, or for a DUI, or every other warrant that he searched, or whatever this officer's role was as a sergeant over the course of many years. He wasn't dealing with evil people. He wasn't dealing with people who were out there intending to break the law and murder people and rape everybody. There's certainly a subset of those people who, in my opinion, are probably mostly sick versus being evil. But this officer is viewing what he does on the road as good versus evil. And if you're in that type of a battle, if you're in a situation where you're dealing with evil, wouldn't you do anything humanly possible to defeat that evil? I mean, if you're dealing with something that is truly evil, are you so much worried about civil rights anymore? Are you worried about due process? Are you worried about equal protection? Or if you know that it's you are on the side of good, fighting the side of evil, maybe those things don't matter so much anymore. If you're fighting the devil, are you going to say, hey, you know what, before we engage in this epic battle between good versus evil, I got to read you your Miranda rights? Or I need to check to make sure that this warrant was properly executed. You're not, all that stuff goes out the window. So this mindset is concerning to me. And it's also concerning that he actually sent this at 2:09 in the morning. There's been some evidence that his attorney actually confirmed that he sent this, but 2 in the morning is right around the time the bars close. And so who knows what this guy was doing at this moment, but he had to know this was going to leak. And he's positioning himself, he's framing this entire debate as good versus evil, which is just totally wrong in my mind. These guys are not in Fallujah. They're not in Iraq. They're not doing any of those things. They're on streets. They're on civilian streets. He goes on. He says, we are sons, daughters. We are husbands, wives. We're partners. We're brothers, sisters, dads, moms. We are human beings with flaws, feelings, and emotions, which I understand. And we've been very empathetic about that. He says, now I'm just rambling. But I want you to know, I'm still proud to be a cop, to be an LMPD cop, no matter the ineptitude in upper command or the mayor's office. This is one of the greatest jobs on earth. With that being said, these next few days are going to be tough. They're going to be long. They're going to be frustrating. They will put a tremendous amount of stress on your families. Do not let your ego get you in a trick bag. Do not have your partner 6, which is, your 6. If you're a clock, your 6 is your partner's back. De-escalate if possible. Do not give the pencil pushers at top. The ones who are too scared to hold the line. He's speaking about his own chain of command, his own officers in his own department. He's calling them too scared to hold the line, a reason to open investigations on you. The same ones that couldn't make decisions to save their lives. We need leaders that lead from the front and not in a room under the desk. Do what you need to do. Go home to your family. Just do it with dignity and make sure you can justify your actions, because everything down there is recorded. Make sure you can justify your actions. It's just telling people to be extra careful, extra cautious. Normally, I would tell you, you don't need to justify your actions, but make sure you can justify your actions because everything is being recorded. I don't know a lot of you guys, gals, but I felt love. Regardless of the outcome today or Wednesday, I know we did the legal, moral, and ethical thing that night. It's sad how good guys are demonized and criminals are canonized. And Breonna Taylor, to my knowledge, is not a criminal. I do not know that she has any criminal record. I have not seen that. She was an innocent young girl who was killed. So the fact that people are rallying around her is not canonization of some sort of a criminal. I understand that argument. I disagree with it on Daniel Prude and George Floyd and all of those other situations. But this one, unless I'm totally mistaken, I have not heard that she has had any criminal record of any real consequence. I could be wrong on that. You could fact check me there. But he goes on, again, this is going to all law enforcement. Put that aside for a while. Keep your focus. Do your jobs that you were trained and capable of doing. Don't put up with their shit. Go home and go home to those lovely families and relationships. So I don't know who he's talking about. I don't know if he's talking about the protesters. Don't know if he's talking about his chain of command. I wish I were there with you leading the charge. Be praying for your safety. Remember, you were just a pawn in the mayor's political game. I'm proof that they do not care about you or your family, and you are replaceable. Stay safe, do the right thing, so on and so forth. Now he says, now go be the warriors you are, but please be safe. None of these, quote, peaceful protesters are worth your career or freedom. Godspeed, boys and girls. That is from Sergeant Mattingly, who was part of the raiding crew who went into Breonna Taylor's apartment. He's telling his fellow officers, don't put up with their shit. If they're telling you how to do things out there, don't put up with those shit, those pencil pushers, those people who couldn't hold a line to save their lives. They can't make a decision. Go be warriors. Go back out there and be warriors, because that's the mindset of this guy. That's the mindset of this. Obviously, he feels comfortable enough emailing this to the entire LMPD police department. I mean, if you are somebody of that mindset and you're breaking into somebody's apartment and you're just firing, bullets off, what this is indicative of somebody who is, I think, not in the right mindset to be an officer. It's just my opinion on it. Good versus evil. Somebody who thinks that everybody who tells him what to do is an idiot. Everything that he knows better than the other people who are higher up, who have more experience. Go be a warrior. We're fighting good versus evil. No wonder this guy fired a bunch of bullets back in that direction. But that's not going to be accounted for. This is the cultural problem that I talk about with law enforcement all the time. Technically, this guy's actions are going to be seen as being justified. We're going to get into Daniel Cameron's, the Attorney General. We're going to get into his statement today. But this is the cultural problem. Technically, Sergeant John Mattingly fired back after he was shot. So his use of force, firing back towards Kenneth Walker, hitting Breonna Taylor, it's all going to be legally justified. Not even really a good argument, right? He had a legal basis to be in her apartment. It was signed off on a warrant by a judge. How he did it, whether he really knocked, who knows? Based on this, if he thought he was taking down evil, maybe he said he knocked, but he didn't really knock. Maybe he didn't follow protocols exactly the way that he should have. We don't have any body cameras. We don't know. We have an independent witness who's a neighbor who said, yeah, he heard him knock or announce. But, the New York Times reporter says she didn't. She interviewed everybody in the apartment and nobody heard anything. So are we going to trust this guy's word? I'm not going to take his word for it. This rant of an email is, sounds like potentially even, a drunken kind of rant that somebody's just firing off at 2 a.m. because they're angry. I think very ill-advised, but not the ideal officer. So he goes in, he fires back. He's justified to be there, whether we trust him or not. He's justified to be in her apartment. He gets shot. He fires back. He hits Breonna Taylor. That case is basically going to be self-defense, or Breonna Taylor is caught in the crossfire of a lawful shooting, which is a tragedy, but it's not murder. And that is what people are upset about. Now, this guy does not sound like an officer that I would particularly want on the street at all, but he's very upset about it. Now, the grand jury, we learned that was going to come today, the grand jury decision. And we see that did happen at 1:30. And here are the final results. So these are the 3 guys who were all involved. Brett Hankison, so this guy who was on the outside, so these 2 guys go in. This is Sergeant John Mattingly. We just read his rambling email. He goes in, he gets shot. Miles Cosgrove is also part of the entry crew. He starts firing back against Breonna Taylor. And then Brett Hankison is on the outside of the building, and he fires back a number of times. Now, his bullets go into the apartment, but we don't know, we're going to get into this, some of the ballistics, whether or not this guy actually hit Breonna Taylor. We know without any question of a doubt, according to the Attorney General and the FBI, that Miles Cosgrove, his bullet was the one who actually killed her, but she was shot 6 times. One of those bullets is accounted for here. Where are the other 5? Have those been accounted for? We don't know. So we know Brett Hankison hit or fired off 10 bullets into the apartment, but we don't know whether any of those hit him or hit Breonna Taylor or not. That being said, Brett Hankison has been charged with 3 counts of what's called first-degree wanton endangerment. The judge set the bond at $15,000 cash. None of the 2 other officers were charged with anything. The only person who was charged was Brett Hankison, who's a former detective, and he was indicted because the grand jury listened to everything that they heard, and they decided that his action of just firing off 10 rounds wherever he wanted to just was something that is reckless, because the bullets went through the walls and it basically entered another family's apartment. There were 3 individuals in the family, and when I was listening to the judge do the indictment or do announce the indictment from the grand jury, they only used their initials, and so the story came out that it was a husband, wife, and a kid. So they were in the line of fire from the bullets, but they didn't actually get hit. So this is what Brett Hankison got indicted with. And this is what the actual statute looks like. So we pulled this from Kentucky, and wanton endangerment in the first degree. It says a person is guilty of wanton endangerment in the first degree when, under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life, he wantonly engages in conduct that creates a substantial danger of death or serious physical injury to another person, Class D felony. Wanton is a really old legal term. We've seen it around a lot. Sort of a good synonym to wanton would be like recklessly. So it would be like, waving a gun, doing something so reckless, so egregious, so such a disregard for the safety or well-being of the value of life that conduct enters, that stage. And wanton endangerment, I think, is the absolute minimum of what this guy should have been charged with. So Daniel Cameron came out today. He is the Attorney General in Louisville. We've got a bunch of clips from him. So he made the announcement today. Let's take a look at what he has to say. This is a Class D felony. He's going to tell us. He's also going to tell us that, we learned that there is now a 72-hour curfew in effect now, Wednesday night, from 9 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. It was announced, so I think, right after this next clip that we have. So let's hear from Daniel Cameron. Now, he picks this up saying, I explained this a little bit previously, but he starts this clip saying that the feds are actually investigating the warrant portion of this case, but they are going to, we don't have any results from that right now. So let's listen to what he has to say.
LMPD's Criminal Interdiction Division. Federal law enforcement partners are conducting that investigation. Sergeant Mattingly and Detectives Cosgrove and Hankison had no known involvement in the preceding investigation or obtainment of the search warrant. They were called into duty as extra personnel to effectuate the service of the search warrant. They only had information conveyed to them during their prior briefing. Evidence shows that officers both knocked and announced their presence at the apartment. The officers' statements about their announcement are corroborated by an independent witness who was near in a proximity to apartment 4. In other words, the warrant was not served as a no-knock warrant. When officers were
So that goes on, and one of the New York Times reporters asks him, and they said, hey, we canvassed everything, and we didn't see that this was a no-knock, or we didn't have anybody corroborate that. So they go around, they ask everybody in the apartment building, hey, did you hear the cops come and knock? Did you hear them actually announce themselves? And they couldn't find anybody. They've got one witness who says that he heard something, and we'll take their word for it. All three of the cops, though, it's important to note from that clip, they had no involvement in the underlying case. So that was the key thing I wanted to highlight there. He says that all three of those cops, they were not involved in the underlying case. They had nothing to do with the warrant. They were just assistant bodies who were basically executing the warrant. So they were showing up at her apartment, and they didn't really even know why they were there, other than they're executing this warrant, is what he makes it sound like. Now, because the feds have the warrant investigation underway, that is going to be forthcoming. What happened with the warrant? Why were they at Breonna Taylor's and Kenneth Walker's house to begin with? So we'll get more information about that. But all three of those cops, from my understanding of it, it sounds like they didn't even really know why they were there or what they were dealing with other than executing the warrant. Also sounds like they got a briefing, but nothing really substantial. The other thing I wanted to point out is this Attorney General, he's very, very, I think, in command of the case, and he did a great job at this press conference. If you are, I would say, in favor of no charges, he did a very good job. But he goes through here, and he's very, very careful about how he phrases this. So let's watch what he says about the bullets. If you watch the full press conference and not just some of the clips that they're floating around, you're going to see that he goes into a little bit of detail about the ballistics. So 3 officers are involved in this case. 3 of them all fire at Breonna Taylor and Kenneth Walker. He says that she's hit 6 times. Breonna Taylor's hit 6 times. Now, the other officers fire a bunch of rounds. Hankison fires 10 shots. And I don't have all the images here, but there are images floating around the internet of the actual scene. So when they went into Breonna Taylor's apartment, Kenneth Walker's apartment, they showed all of the bullet holes all over the place, and it's gruesome. I mean, there's dozens and dozens of bullets that went around. There's bullet holes in the ceiling. There's bullet holes behind the refrigerator. I mean, they shot everything up, and they can only really identify, from what this clip sounds like, one bullet. They can identify the bullet that actually resulted in Breonna Taylor's death, the bullet that killed her. But what about the 5 other bullets that were in her body? Where did those come from? And so this clip, you're going to see there's a distinction between the Kentucky sort of forensics lab and the FBI. They reached different conclusions about which bullet actually killed her and who fired it, but we don't hear about those 5 other bullets. We only hear about the one bullet that was fired by Cosgrove. So let's listen.
After being struck. Detective Hankison fired his weapon 10 times, including from an outside sliding glass door and through a bedroom window. Some bullets traveled through apartment 4 and into apartment 3 before some exited that apartment. At the time, 3 residents of apartment 3 were at home, including a male, a pregnant female, and a child. There is no conclusive evidence that any bullets fired from Detective Hankison's weapon struck Ms. Taylor.
No conclusive evidence.
The KSP ballistics analysis did not identify which of the 3 officers fired the fatal shot. After receiving that information, I asked the FBI crime lab to conduct its own analysis to see if they reached the same results. The FBI ballistics analysis concluded the fatal shot was fired by Detective Cosgrove. Our office looked at both reports to determine if there were major differences in the procedures used by each lab that would have led the FBI to identify who fired the fatal shot. Both law enforcement agencies use similar equipment and analysis, and each lab is highly respected for their work. There was nothing our investigators could point to, nor anything provided by the respective agencies, that directly explains why one lab made the call while another did not. I think it is worth repeating again that our investigation found that Mattingly and Cosgrove were justified in their use of force.
All right, so this is important. So if Mattingly and Cosgrove were in Breonna Taylor's apartment and they were justified in firing back against her and Kenneth Walker, then they're in the clear. But if the other officer, what the heck's his name? The other guy, Brett, if he is outside of the apartment and he's firing in and he doesn't have any justification to be in her residence or be inside the apartment, if Hankison is firing his gun wantonly and recklessly and with a disregard for that life, if a single bullet hits Breonna Taylor, that is attempted manslaughter or actual manslaughter, or it's contributory negligence, or it's reckless homicide, negligent homicide. This Attorney General goes on to explain that there are 6 different levels of homicide in Kentucky. If one of those bullets hit her, in my opinion, he is absolutely liable for that. It's shooting somebody. It would be the same as sort of an attempted murder. If he was doing it recklessly, or it's a reckless homicide or negligent homicide or whatever they have in Kentucky, that would elevate his charges dramatically. There's all sorts of dangerous crimes involved, dangerous designations that you can have if you use a weapon and you injure somebody. So even if a single bullet hit her, then those charges, that wanton recklessness, that wanton endangerment, those charges would go up dramatically. And this Attorney General did not specify for us whether they did an analysis on that or whether that evidence was presented to the grand jury. We know where the one bullet came from. It came from Miles Cosgrove. Now, there's some indication. He goes on in his press conference to say that she could have died instantly. Breonna Taylor could have been shot and died instantly, or she could have been on the ground for a number of minutes sort of bleeding out. And so, she got hit with 6 bullets from 6 different parts of her body, and we want to know where the other 5 bullets came from. Are we going to get the ballistics report? Are we going to see the analysis? Where are we going to see any of this evidence that was presented to the grand jury? Probably not. We're probably not going to see any of that. We know where the one bullet came from, but those other 5, probably not going to hear anything about it. Why? Because they're not going to release the grand jury indictment, and we don't have any body camera footage, and they're just continuing their investigation. So we're not going to get much of it. Speaking of that body camera footage, was there any? Let's take a look.
There was no video or body camera footage of the officer's attempted execution of a search warrant at Ms. Taylor's residence. Video footage begins at the point that area patrol officers arrive at the location. Therefore, the sequence of events from March 13th had to be pieced together through ballistics evidence, 911 calls, police radio traffic, and interviews.
Yeah, and so, that's great that they're piecing it all together. Would have really liked some body camera footage, would really like to, a little bit more transparency, because from what we've seen thus far, it seems to me like some of this stuff is happening pretty sloppily. I want to show you a screenshot that we found from an investigative report about Breonna Taylor, and we're going to see that just on the face sheet of this document, we've got some charges. It's a death investigation, and I want to preface this by saying this may be a supplement. This may be a supplement to another report report. There may be other reports out there, but if you just look at the face of this thing, you're going to see some pretty important stuff is missing. Let's take a look. So this is the incident investigation report. It's an open active case number here, date and time. We've got the Louisville apartment. We've got Officer Omar Lee, happened on March 13th, which is the date of the incident. We've got a death investigation, and the victim here is Breonna Taylor. There she is, right? Black, female, age 26. She's a resident there, non-Hispanic. But she doesn't have any injuries. There are no injuries on this document right here, right? She was shot 6 times. So why didn't they put an injury there? Similarly, why do we have that the premises were entered? Well, there's no notation there, but somebody did mark this. They said, was it a forced entry? No. So somebody filled this out. You know, one of the main excuses that cops have when they do stuff like this on incident and investigative reports is they say, well, I was just kind of flying through it. I must have forgot to enter in that box. Not that important. Okay, but you did enter this box. You did say that there was no forced entry. So Officer Omar Lee, what happened when you were filling out this form? What did you do? Why did you say there were no injuries? She was shot 6 times. Why didn't you notate that the premises were entered? Why didn't you notate that it was a forced entry? What's going on here? So that sounds to me like, just kind of like sloppy police work. The prosecutor's office is going to say over and over and over again that we present, hey, listen. We're just fact finders. That's all we do. We just look for the facts, and all we do is then present them to the grand jury. If the grand jury doesn't want to indict anybody, well, that's the grand jury's fault, and it's very important to our democracy, and it protects against malfeasance from the government, and all these great reasons why grand juries are good. But the prosecutors are in charge of presenting the facts. They're the ones who gather it. They're the ones who have the police force and the FBI and all of these special agents and all of these detectives. And if they're all working as part of the same cabal of police officers, maybe those people are not going to do their investigation so thoroughly if one of their brethren is being charged. That's where the issue comes in. So this guy does a very nice job, a very polished job of presenting what he did, but it's very, very easy for all of these guys to just whitewash this whole thing just a little bit. It doesn't have to be big, but if 20 people who are part of the investigation just bend it just a little bit, then it's very easy to say, well, we didn't do anything. I mean, we had a very objective just recitation of the facts, and the grand jury made the decision that the grand jury made. But you can take their word for it or not. I certainly do not. The next question then becomes, are they going to release the grand jury report? So there's a lot that happens in a grand jury proceeding. These are secret proceedings. They're hidden behind closed doors. They're typically recorded. You can get transcripts of these things, but they're highly protected because it's a secretive forum. Grand juries happen in the close of dark, in the dark of night. They are something that happens in secret because they don't want it to be impacted by political things or by outside pressure. It's sort of a protected enclave of your fellow men and women, your fellow citizens, who will review the evidence behind closed doors, not feel any pressure, and then make a charging decision. It's the reason that they exist. But in these types of situations, there's transcripts. We can see what evidence was presented. We can see what the jurors were asking, what the questions were. It's all transcribed. And so in Arizona, when we get these transcripts, we go through a very formal process. We can't take these and put them on the internet. We can't take these and make a million photocopies of them. So there's a process that we go through where we check these things out and then check them back in. And that's how this works. So one of the reporters asks Cameron, they say, hey, are you going to release the grand jury report? Here's what he has to say about that.
As to the question about the makeup of the grand jury, we might be able to, I need to confirm on that front about.
Talking about, permission.
Yeah, the fact that this has received so much scrutiny, I think it'd be inappropriate for me to share the information about the makeup of the grand jury, just to the extent I can protect them.
Yeah, and so the question there again was about what is the makeup of the grand jury? People want to know, are they, is it all a bunch of white people on the grand jury? Is it a bunch of white cops on the grand jury? Who's part of the grand jury? And so he, certainly refused to answer that, which I think is part of his ethical obligation. These things happen in secret for a reason. So there's a lot that he just cannot disclose, regardless of whether he wanted to or not. Sounds like he kind of wanted to disclose that. Sounds like he wanted to say, yeah, half of those people were African American, but he couldn't say that because he couldn't say that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Sounds like he wanted to say that, but he didn't. Now, That being said, Kentucky's governor, Andy Beshear, is calling for evidence to be released in the investigation. So this just happened at 1:09 today on Twitter. Says included here, Gov. Beshear also believes that the racial makeup of the grand jury should be released, which AG Cameron says wouldn't be appropriate because it could risk exposing the identities of the jurors. Now, I don't think that's a big deal. If there's a bunch of jurors and you say half of them were black, half of them were white, and 3 of them were Asian or Mexican or whatever, how does that help identify anybody? I don't know, but they're going to, sounds like they're going to try to stay hard and fast by that rule and not disclose much of anything. So what is going on now? What's happening in Louisville? Well, we've got a lot. So let's take a look at some of the immediate reaction. We see protests are already forming. This is taking place literally this happened right after the announcement this afternoon. Let's take a look. So can you hear what they're saying? We didn't get it, burn it down. We didn't get it, burn it down is what they're saying. We didn't get it, burn it down, something to that effect. So obviously, not trending in a very optimistic direction in terms of the protesters. They also came very, very prepared. Have you seen this clip floating around on Twitter? As soon as the announcement was made, it's weird. We have all these U-Haul trucks just around, and they're just ready to go. Signs ready to rock and roll.
Hey, somebody with me on this. Let's go, man. Right now.
A lot of people out there. Yeah, so I've said it before, I've said it again. I don't know what abolishing the police or defunding the police is going to do for anybody. Everybody's upset that there was a tragedy about Breonna Taylor. Burning building downs, breaking things, killing people, injuring people. That is not going to help this country move the ball forward on criminal justice reform issues. For a very long time, I've disavowed all of the rioters and quite frankly, all of the protesters because they are in too close proximity with the rioters. If you have a bunch of peaceful protesters who are hanging out with a bunch of people who are burning things down, by association, you are no longer a peaceful protester. Unless you're doing something to stop them from committing crimes or for breaking things, you're just as bad as them. It's the same standard that I've applied towards the police. If there's one bad officer who shoots and kills somebody or who beats somebody or who does something wrong, you've got one bad cop. But if you've got 10 of those cops associates, 10 other cops, 10 people in the department, the chief, the sergeant, the lieutenants, if those people are covering for that one bad cop, they're just as bad as that bad cop. Same rule applies to the protesters. It's unacceptable for them to be just standing there with their sign peacefully protesting, but not condemning their neighbor who's throwing rocks and burning, innocent buildings down, innocent courts down, and just ruining the society in which they live. It's not okay. So the same standard has to apply. We have more protests developing in Louisville. Let's take a look. All right, so we can see it's just going to continue to go on and on. We are learning that YouTube is also shutting down the live streamers in Louisville. Let's take a look over here. YouTube, we just saw this afternoon as well. YouTube is shutting down the live streamers in Louisville. Hopefully this stream is going on loud and clear, but it's going to be something that we're going to continue to follow. Like I said, literally right now, I checked the sundown time in Louisville, Kentucky. It was 7:39 their time, which is about right now, I think. So it's probably heating up, and we're going to continue to, to follow the story. Hopefully it's quiet. Hopefully, nobody gets hurt, nobody burns down anything, and everybody just kind of can vent their frustration peacefully. That's what we want to see, because anytime the country gets unified around these tragedies, around George Floyd, everybody watched that video and was sick over it. Everybody looks at that Breonna Taylor picture and they're sick over it. They want to see meaningful improvements being made. But when we're just burning down buildings, it sets the justice reform movement back 10 years. Suddenly, everybody who was on our side, everybody who was sympathetic with civil liberties and seeing some modest reforms to our law enforcement agencies, the pendulum is swinging the other way. They are now saying those people are animals, those people are monsters, and the police are heroes. So it reverts back, and it sets us back, and it's just really unfortunate. And I hope that, I hope it's not the same story. We're expecting a certain story to take place in Louisville tonight, but I hope that does not happen. All right, so let's dive into the next story. A couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we talked about Kyle Rittenhouse. Now, Kyle Rittenhouse has been, like I said, one of the most important stories, I think, of this year. This is a story that has captivated everybody sort of on both sides. Very, very highly polarizing. But just recently, a new video was released. Now, we did a lot of in-depth analysis on Kyle Rittenhouse. We broke it down every which way. We did frame by frames. We looked at the audio analysis so we could match up the frame on the video to when we could see or hear the gunshot actually we could hear it. We could hear the gunshot, see it in the audio spike, then we can match it up. So we did a deep dive on this thing, but the FightBack Foundation, which is the organization that is helping Kyle Rittenhouse raise funds, they released a video, I think it was yesterday, that is excellent. It's very good. And I've been pretty critical of some of Kyle Rittenhouse's defense team, specifically Ellen Wood and John Pierce and some of the people who were involved. But whatever they did to put this thing together, I think it was excellent. Very, very good job. And even introduced some new footage that I really hadn't seen before. So let's go through it. By the way, if you have not seen it, it's 11 minutes. I would encourage you to go watch it on their YouTube channel. It's behind an age restriction, so we're not going to replay it here. And we're also not going to show you any of the gruesome stuff, because then we get those content restrictions as well. So Kyle Rittenhouse, you remember this scene here. This comes from the actual video. And so as a quick refresher, we have Rittenhouse who's running away. We've got Rosenbaum in the red who is chasing him. And then we've got McGinnis who is the reporter. And so this video goes back and it's now labeling everybody and it's following along as we go through this. But we're going to see that he also gets kicked in the head. So that's Rittenhouse on the ground there. This video showed us this. I had seen something very similar to this, but I did not see this actual image. So this is a new image. And we've made the point for a long time here that this was a self-defense case. And the more and more evidence that comes out, the more we see it looks exactly like a self-defense case. You've got this guy who comes over and hits him over the head with the skateboard. This guy's doing a jump flying ninja kick and trying to, to hit him in the head. And so it's just more evidence that this stuff was justified. That's an image that I had not seen before. We also are learning more about the other guy who was shot in the arm. So Gage Grosskreutz was shot in the arm by Kyle. We saw him run up to him and then suddenly kind of stop and then start to attack him again. And Kyle shoots him in the arm. You can see that's pretty gruesome there. And somebody goes and visits him. This gentleman here says, Ben Stuckless. He says, so the kid shot Gage as he drew his weapon and Gage retreated with his gun in his hand. I just talked to Gage, who is this guy who got shot, who was on the scene. His only regret was not killing the kid and hesitating to pull the gun before emptying the entire mag into him. Calls him a coward. So, that's just sort of more motive information. It's just indicative that these guys were out to actually go and chase him down and kill him. That's what their mindset was. And so Kyle, this entire time, he's retreating from this altercation and he's in a situation where he's getting attacked from multiple different angles. And so what do you expect him to do except to fire back? And that's the conclusion that we came to here. And the more and more evidence that comes out, we're seeing all these other different angles. I think it significantly supports that. We've got more evidence. The video goes through and it says they tell the backstory on Joseph Rosenbaum, who was the initial aggressor, at least in the videos that we saw. They've got evidence that this guy was around the protests or the riots that night, really instigating a lot with other people who were there. And then suddenly, sort of snaps and he's chasing Kyle Rittenbaum. But there's more to the story. So the defense team is saying that this individual here, who is Joseph Rosenbaum, that basically his activity, his action, his motives showed that this was 100% self-defense because there was a dispute that was brewing earlier in the night. And so this is a screenshot from this situation where he is getting into an altercation with somebody else over here. We're going to show you a picture of him shortly. But basically they're in an altercation. They're fighting over something. And that is what starts off the whole scene. That's what initiates.
Rosenbaum retaliated, focusing his rage on a guard in a green t-shirt.
I don't know why it's...
Moments.
All right, so I don't know what's going on with the video. I don't know why it's pixelated like that. But basically what we're looking at is this situation here. So we have Kyle Rittenhouse. He gets into the altercation with Jeffrey Rosenbaum or Joseph Rosenbaum because he thinks he's somebody else. He thinks he's this individual right here. So this is another person who was there who looks exactly like Kyle Rittenhouse. This apparently was the person who was on the other side of Joseph Rosenbaum. So if he's over here, let's see. If this is where he was, on the other end of that is this guy. So he's looking at him from the other direction. So Joseph Rosenbaum thinks that this is the guy that he's chasing, when in reality he is chasing Kyle Rittenhouse. So if you watch the full video, I would encourage you to do that, especially if you're interested in this case. Very well done, very good information. They actually connect it. They tie it from one person to another person. So in other words, the videos that we edited and showed on this show was when he was in the parking lot, and then from the other video when he's running down the street to sort of re-meet up with the police. But they also show him passing other people, and they splice it all together. And you can see that a lot of people were yelling at him and screaming at him as he was running down the street. Somebody says, cranium that boy, cranium being your head. In other words, hit that guy in the head, smack him in the head, do something, and stop him from running away because he just shot somebody. So as Kyle Rittenhouse is running down the street, there's just this horde, this throng of protesters who are chasing him down in that manner. And so we're going to continue to follow this along. Another court date for Kyle Rittenhouse, I believe, his extradition hearing. He's still in Illinois. I think that's happening this Friday on the 25th. So we're going to know more about that. But he's still in Illinois. He's going to have his extradition hearing, and then presumably he's going to be extradited over to Wisconsin, depending on what his attorneys are doing. We also know that Kyle Rittenhouse has an actual criminal defense lawyer on the team now. We talked about him a couple shows ago, and he's in Wisconsin, and so he's been doing it for 30 years, and so he's been brought onto the team to help them understand, presumably, how things work in Wisconsin, how the judges work, how who the prosecutors are, what the jury demographics look like, and that's really what you want. The other two attorneys that Kyle Rittenhouse had, I have I actually do have my doubts about them, but they handle other types of cases, a lot of high-profile cases. They've got sort of a reputation for being good with the media and managing that stuff, but you need boots on the ground criminal defense attorney, and they finally got one, which is good news because I thought that the team was missing that. So I'm glad that they sort of filled that gap there. Now, I want to stop there and let's take a look at some of the comments and see what everybody has to say about any of these issues. In particular, I'm curious about some of the feedback on Breonna Taylor. Do you think those other officers should have been charged? Do you think that the one charge is sufficient? So let's take a look at some of the comments, and we'll wrap up this hour with some Q&A. And so here we go. Let's take a look. So when we go back over here, self-defense is not a crime. That comes from Thane559. James, you know how many people have been harmed for not joining in with the BLM protests? Let's see. Holy Sword of Light, are you for or against Kyle? I've been strongly in favor of self-defense claim for Kyle Rittenhouse, covered it a lot on this channel, and it was just something that I think people were expecting me to be on the other side, but I'm certainly not. I think it was a clear-cut case of self-defense, and we even read through the probable cause statement on Kyle Rittenhouse, and I swear it was written by the defense. It was truly written by a prosecutor. We identified who that was, but there was also the language there, and especially a lot of the language from McGinnis, that was all, in my mind, written very, very favorably to Kyle Rittenhouse. It was done in a way that I think supports self-defense. Every single paragraph, in other words, they would say Kyle Rittenhouse did all of this stuff, but the paragraph before that would say, yeah, but Rosenbaum was chasing him and threw something at him and did all of this stuff. So I think the probable cause statement itself, which was used to bring the charges against Kyle Rittenhouse, by itself was insufficient on its face. So let's see. Rob, what do you think will happen with the SCOTUS situation? Yeah, SCOTUS. Let's talk about SCOTUS. I forgot to cover SCOTUS. All right, so let's let's go over to SCOTUS. I totally forgot about SCOTUS. We had so much to cover today. We have another situation. I had a Jacob Blake update, but it's too much to pack in. So we'll get to some of that tomorrow. But we do have some SCOTUS news. Let's do this before we wrap up the show today. So Jenna Ellis says that on Twitter today, said that President Trump says that he nominated or says the nominees for the Supreme Court are down to 5 women. Okay, so now we know that 5 women, but one of them who it is not going to be, it sounds like that's going to be Barbara Lagoa. So Barbara Lagoa was somebody who a lot of people were in favor of. I think she's from Florida, and they had some opinions of her. They thought that she would be a much better pick than Amy Coney Barrett. We covered Amy Coney Barrett a lot yesterday, a lot. So we're not going to do that again. But if Trump has his list whittled down to 5 people and Barbara Lagoa's not on it, then what are we going to be looking at in terms of those 5 people? Who are they? And the betting markets are also showing a little bit of a change. This is from predictit.org. These are the top people, the top contenders according to the betting markets. And the betting markets are I like to follow them. I think they're usually fairly accurate, or at least they're accurate in terms of the trends. And the way these work is you just buy shares of the candidate. You're basically making bets. You can buy yes for 81 cents. And if you win, if it turns out to be yes, you'll make some money. But if you buy no and it turns out to be no, you'll make some money. So it's kind of like a stock market, but it's for presidential elections and Senate elections and all this stuff. So this is what Predicted is showing us. And Amy Coney Barrett is still sort of running away with this. Most people are hearing, the chatter that she's favorable. We know Trump met with her. We know that she's highly endorsed by the Federalist Society and all these people. And so she's at the top of the list. This is what the chart looks like in terms of the movement. So we can see that Amy Coney Barrett is still trending up, and the others are trending down. So the top 3, Lagoa is going down and down and down. It's probably even further now because we know that Donald Trump doesn't have a meeting scheduled with her. And then Rushing, we covered, very young, highly intellectual, but she's going down as well. And people, I think, kind of thought that she was kind of a long shot anyways. I mean, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing, what I'm following from a lot of the people on Twitter and a lot of the, the blogs and the news channels that I follow, it's looking like it's probably going to be Amy Coney Barrett, but it's really hard to predict these things. And especially with President Trump, I mean, who knows what he's going to do. But it's also looking like we may see some senators, who are kind of waffling a little bit on this entire topic. So remember when we covered this was at our SCOTUS HQ episodes, we were trying to identify which of the squishy Republicans would be siding with the Democrats and which of the squishy Republicans would be siding with the Republicans. And here is what we came to the conclusion of yesterday. This is where we were yesterday. Mitt Romney had indicated on Tuesday that he was going to be siding with the Republicans, putting them over the top. So that would have been 51 votes, would have been 51 for the Republicans. And that's all you need because of the rules in the Senate. You only need 51 yes to get that nominee appointed. So Romney was waffling as he does, and now he is joining the Republicans, which was good news for the Republicans, not so good news for the Democrats. But they still had Lisa Murkowski. They still had Susan Collins from Maine. And so these 47 were 49. And if all they needed to do was flip 2 people, in other words. So they needed to get to 51. They needed 51 on their side, because if they only had 50, then the Vice President Mike Pence could have come in and he could have been the tiebreaker, and the Republican Party still would have won the nomination fight. So now we are seeing some changes. So we saw today that Lisa Murkowski from Alaska is actually modifying her position a little bit, walking that back as they do. A few days ago, she said, hey, fair is fair. We are not going to be voting for anybody at this time. We are going to wait. Fair is fair. We had to wait when Obama appointed Merrick Garland. Now we are going to actually also wait, even though our party's in power and we also have the presidency. We're still going to wait because fair is fair. Well, today her position is changing just a little bit. We have Josh Kaplan over on Twitter. He says Alaska Public Media is saying Senator Lisa Murkowski says she can't rule out voting for Trump's SCOTUS nominee. And then the Daily Caller confirms that, says basically she's saying that she's changing her tune. So the Alaskan media is now reporting that Lisa Murkowski may actually, in fact, be joining the Republicans in voting for the nominee. And they're all walking it back. They're basically saying, well, we're going to listen to it. and then maybe we'll decide to vote with the Republicans. I thought all of the responses immediately saying we're not going to nominate anybody or support a vote from anybody from Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski were highly premature. They didn't even know who the nominee was. They didn't have time to even speak to anybody. So I thought it was premature. I think, if you're in that position and you're a senator and you're part of one of the biggest decisions that your job requires you to do, I think you'd wait a little bit until you knew who the presumptive nominee was. I mean, did these people even speak with the Trump administration to determine maybe they like that person or not? Or is it just a blanket no? So I'm going to guess that Lisa Murkowski got some flack, got some feedback from her constituents in Alaska, probably, made that first statement, went home. They all blew up her inbox, and she's thought, it's probably a good time for me to walk that back a little bit. So the new chart actually looks like this, and it may be closer to 52 versus 48. So if Susan Collins goes over here, it'd be a 52 to 48, which really, really makes it an uphill battle for the Democrats. Really does. They would have to pull off 3 people from the Republicans. And based on what I'm reading, I'm just not seeing anything that supports that is going to happen. So that is the Supreme Court update. Quite frankly, I think that the Republicans are going to ram it through. I think that this is going to be done relatively quickly. And we're going to have some confirmation hearings, going to see how this impacts the campaign. It's going to require Kamala Harris to go back into Washington to stop campaigning, to go be a part of these confirmation hearings. There's indications that a lot of the conservatives, people like Rush Limbaugh and the Republicans, are saying that they should not even have a confirmation hearing. In other words, the Senate Judiciary Committee shouldn't be doing the hearing. They should just take it right to a floor vote. None of the Kavanaugh spectacles, none of this, questioning from the Republicans and the Democrats, enough of that. Just take it to a vote, which is an interesting idea. Don't think that's going to happen. This is one of the senators' most coveted things to do, is to grandstand in front of everybody, to bring a candidate in who has literally led a perfect life. All of these people, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, if you're at this situation, if you're at this level in the federal courts, you have a perfect life. And Amy Coney Barrett and even Kavanaugh, I mean, these people, Kagan and Sotomayor and Ginsburg and all of these people, they basically lead perfect lives. No mistakes, no crimes. They don't even say anything controversial. They come out of their mother's womb with a gavel in their hand, ready to go to the Supreme Court. So they live their entire lives this way. So for all of these senators, and like I said, it's a bipartisan issue. Anybody who's at this caliber is basically has a bulletproof resume. So all they want to do is just beat them up and score some political points for their base. I think it's mostly useless, but we're going to go through the show anyways. And I do think that we are going to see a confirmation happen, and the Senate is going to vote to affirm that person. I think it's going to happen. Don't think that there's anything that the Democratic Party can do about it. And this is going to be a big deal for the foreseeable future. Amy Coney Barrett, we talked about it. If it is her, she's 48 years old. She presumably could be on the court for the next 30 to 40 years. 48. Ginsburg was 87 when she died. Amy Coney Barrett's 48. A solid 40 years. And so that's why this is such a contentious thing. The court will flip from a 5-4 conservative liberal majority to a 6-3 conservative liberal majority. And I will tell you this. I am not a liberal. I'm not a left-leaning big government person. I'm also not a Republican, sort of the modern incantation of what a Republican means these days. But I will tell you that I do not side with a lot of the conservative positions on judicial reform or justice reform. For some reason, a lot of the Republicans out there think that, big government is terrible. They hate unions. They hate police unions. They hate big government. They hate, social welfare programs. They can't stand all of these problems with the country. But unions are okay as long as it's the police. Big government is okay as long as it's the police. We don't want big government to tax you to death or to, care about the environment or to do things for the schools. But we're very comfortable giving total control, total authority, 100% autonomy to law enforcement or to private prisons or to any of these entities that, these government contractors. They're all okay with that. So the conservatives, Scalia and Thomas and all of these people, they're terrible for the most part on search and seizure rules. They're terrible for the most part on things like right to counsel. And, those issues that are involved in the criminal justice system, they just basically defer to the police. They say, well, the cop had a basis for that, so it doesn't matter that they just invalidated your Fourth Amendment rights or they didn't provide you an attorney. You didn't ask hard enough. Well, he kind of asked for an attorney, but he didn't ask hard enough. Therefore, he doesn't get any counsel. So there's a lot of those opinions in the Supreme Court that we see, and the conservatives are pretty terrible about that, quite frankly. So we'll see how Amy Coney Barrett, rules. We covered her last week, or actually yesterday, and we did a deep dive into some of her positions on some of those issues. But we'll see. These people, once they hit the court, they change a lot, and it's a really, really bizarre type of metamorphosis that happens once judges actually hit the bench. But we're going to see if that happens. But long story short, I think that it is going to move forward, and we will have a new judge on the Supreme Court before the election happens. I think the wheels are in motion, and I'm not sure that there's anything that the Democrats can do. All right, back over to the comments. Let's see. Unions are vile, police or teachers especially. Yes, I have a huge problem with the unions, especially the police unions. We have a police union here in Arizona called PLEA, the Phoenix Law Enforcement Association. Oh my goodness, you should see the things that these people put out. It's hysterical. All right, let's see. Real name. Unions gave us the weekend fund the police. Big problem within our education system is not thoroughly teaching the Constitution and how we came to be. I agree with that. Somebody asked, what is your favorite baseball team? Don't hate me on this. I don't have one. I don't even watch baseball. I would have a difficult time naming 5 teams. I could name the Arizona Diamondbacks, and that's about it. I'm not particularly interested in sports for some reason. This is my sports. The Supreme Court fight is my sports. And so let's take a look at some of the other comments. We've got, all this is going to do is cause people to suffer. The Dems will cause the court to be expanded. I heard today, I haven't confirmed this, but I did hear that Justice Ginsburg very recently actually said that she does not support court packing. Very recently said that it would be very detrimental to our republic. And so we'll see what the Democrats want to do with that. If they try to pack the court, I would be so disgusted by that. I think most Americans would also. What we're going through right now is dramatic if you're a Democrat. It's very dramatic if you're a liberal. But this is something that our country does. Our country is set up for this. We have a whole constitution and we have a whole structure in place, literally, for this process. So, the Trump administration, the Senate Republicans, anything that they're doing is all part of the rules. It's all part of the game. They're allowed to do this. They're going to do it because it's the rules. They have the football. They're allowed to run with that football. It's their play. They get to call it, and they get to run whatever play they want to run with. So they're going to do it. If the Democrats come around and say, yeah, that's fine, but we're just going to add on 5, 6, 7 judges onto the Supreme Court, to me, that is changing the rules of the game. Legally, they can do that if they control all of the houses and they have the requirements necessary under the Constitution to do it. But to me, it just feels like sour grapes. Because it is sour grapes. They're saying we didn't get our way. They could have played the whole thing differently. If you play this out like a game of chess, Ginsburg could have retired under the Obama administration. She was, already in her 80s. She chose not to. She chose to gamble because she thought Hillary Clinton was going to win. Hillary Clinton did not win. Therefore, they lost the gamble. They played. They lose. Same situation here with Judge Thomas. Justice Thomas is old. He's in the same situation as Ginsburg was. Yeah, no indication he has any of the same health problems. Ginsburg had a slew of health problems. And so Thomas is still on the bench. And so many people are saying, hey, look, the polls are showing that you're going to lose this thing, Donald Trump. You're going to get blown out. That's what the polls say. I don't believe any of the polls. They were all wrong in 2016, so I don't have any faith in them, or I really don't have much faith in really anybody who is trying to analyze data in 2020. Everybody is wrong about the data. COVID data, every data it's all bad. So you have President Trump, who is now going to just ram through this nomination, and the Democrats are going to be very upset about it. If they try to make a change, I think it's going to backfire on them electorally for a very long time. So, Yeah, Tim Bola says, ironic you don't know sports, but you just used a football analogy. And he says, cheers for Maine, which is true. As I was saying the football thing, I was noticing that. It was like, I don't even follow sports, but it was an analogy that I used. Polls are rigged. Somebody says, I think Scalia got whacked. Yeah, it was a weird thing with Scalia. Very, very strange. He died very abruptly. There were people saying, he was in a sort of secluded thing. I don't like to get into the conspiracy theories, but Scalia was somebody I really loved reading his opinions. I really, really enjoyed them because I didn't always agree with them, but they were so just well written and so, I think, fiery that they were a fun read, a lot more fun than a lot of the other opinions. Do you ever worry that what you say on YouTube could impact your career? And the answer on that is it's a great question. And yeah, I do wonder about it. I would hope that people would separate the legal work that we do from my commentary on this show. I would hope that would be the case because my team and I, we have an awesome team here. We have over 20 people who work here, and they do an amazing job helping people deal with their criminal charges. Like I said, most of our clients are very, very good people, very good. They just had one bad night. They had one accident, they had one argument, they had one too many to drink that night, but they're good people, and we're just trying to help get them back on track. We have had, since this show has grown, there has been some commentary. Some people will leave reviews, and some people will sort of badmouth us on Facebook or whatever, and that's fine. I understand that. I understand these are totally controversial topics. It's very, very high tensions around the world right now, and so I get it. But I do believe that this stuff, I sort of feel called to talk about these issues. They're so important to me. Every day, I see this stuff going on in our office, outside of our office, in the real world. And fortunately, YouTube has given us this format and this ability to have this conversation in a way that we can be useful. I'm just trying to be useful. I'm trying to provide some information and some analysis. And so I think in my heart, as long as I'm being authentic, as long as I'm speaking with some integrity, and as long as I'm being of service to other people and just providing some commentary or even just some entertainment, just, helping people understand that this stuff is going on and sharing my perspective about that, then that is good for the world. And so I'm going to continue to do that, even if on the edges, on the margins, it's not so good for our business. But I will tell you, by and large, most of the feedback has just been overwhelmingly positive. The channel is growing. I really appreciate you all being here. I'm so grateful that you're here and so thankful that you are subscribing and sharing the content with other people, because that's how this channel grows. And truly, I have lost a lot of faith in our politicians and anybody in the government and all of these people with law enforcement and in the Senate and in the presidency and in the judiciary, all telling us that things are going to get better in our justice system. I'm just not seeing it happen. I think it will happen when enough people are part of the conversation, when enough people sort of flip a little bit and they say, well, yeah, I may be a Republican and support the police, but at the same time, I also see some pretty good room for improvement just across the board. So that's the conversation that we're having. It's a great question, and I want to thank you for asking that. And so today, what I would like to do is end it here, and we're going to be back tomorrow at 4 p.m., same time. So it's 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is Pacific time. It's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to continue to do these live streams every day. So subscribe, hit that notification bell so that when we do go live, you get pinged about it. And if you know anybody who would be interested in the show or who likes to have this conversation with us, share the link with them. Send them this, say, hey, go check this guy out, check this show out. This law firm does a good job. And we would love that very much. So I will leave you with that. We're going to check back in tomorrow. We'll have more updates on what's going on with Breonna Taylor and Louisville. We're going to be back on Friday with the Rittenhouse update and just tons of stuff. Too much to talk about to cram into one show. So we've got some other leftover topics that we didn't get to today that we'll be back with tomorrow. So everybody have a great night. I'll talk